Hey, my name is Josh Korak. I'm a mental health counselor in the Northern Colorado area. In this space, I get the chance to interview professionals in the field, talk about mental illness, self-care, and so much more. With this show, I ask you to join me in doing what one of my favorite philosophers, a Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, says: smile, breathe, and go slowly. This is Care with Korak. Hey y'all, welcome back to Care with Korak. Hope everyone's doing well and enjoying the fall weather. Without a doubt, this is probably one of my favorite times of the year. It's really a bummer that fall is such a short season in Colorado. I'm very jealous of my friends listening over on the East Coast right now. I know you're probably getting some great weather and some good fall vibes right now. Well, today we're here to finish the rest of my interview with Cody Bradford. I didn't realize until after I had already published the last episode that I never explicitly said that there was going to be a part 2, so surprise. I mean, I know it was titled part 1, but, you know, I'm still learning, so apologize for any confusion, but I appreciate all the feedback I've gotten so far from you guys, and keep it coming. I'm always here to learn. In this part with Cody, we get to continue our discussion talking about the comparisons between accessibility in mental health care and outdoor guiding, some of the privilege that comes with that. We talk about the use of social media with mental health and education, staying within the bounds of our expertise as professionals, and we get to talk about the Joker. What is that even going to be about? You got to listen to find out, so stick around. Well, let's jump into it. There's no time to waste. This is Care with Korak with Cody Bradford, Part 2. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you've been able to reach out and find that support. And it's hard, you know, you mentioned insurance stuff earlier, and it's not easy either. Like, I don't know fully how to best explain it, but just the way that mental health care has been structured in our culture and our society is not the easiest to access, I guess, for a lot of people who aren't necessarily as privileged as some of us are, like I was when I was growing up and able to do counseling. You know, it's only recent changes, I guess, that insurance has been started to be accepted in more places, and in a lot of places it's still not.
Which is an interesting parallel to guiding. I mean, I don't even have to get into the moral quandaries. I mean, I'll fully put out there that I think our completely individualistic mindset here is just completely misguided in our country, the U.S. The bootstrap mentality. I think it's flawed, like 95%, and it's really unfortunate that we're just now getting to the point where we can even begin to think like, oh, I definitely need to see a mental health counselor, or I definitely need to, see a physical therapist about like my back or whatever. Oh, but does my insurance cover it? And like just now, an insurance company, which in my opinion shouldn't exist as a primary means of care, of affording care, the idea of affording care even. Anyway, it's funny how this is all parallel in a completely like arbitrary sense to the guiding industry, because guides are recreation. It's literally built into the name. It is not necessary. And so in that way, it's not comparable. It's only comparable in the sense that it's kind of ironic that in the guiding world, it's not regulated. It's self-regulated. If your guide isn't AMGA certified, that's not necessarily like an indictment of their abilities or anything. It's I think it's meaningful, but I also think because it's really expensive to become a guide. Right. I've spent a lot of money and still I live out of a van full time just to become a guide. It's kind of funny how, I mean, the world of like mental health care, for example, and then guiding, like, mirror each other. One's very much important and one is just totally auxiliary. Um, Yet nonetheless, it's like they're mirrored images of each other. How lack of regulation has just steeped all of us in kind of this interesting conundrum of like, oh, I want mental health counselor. Oh, I've got to be able to pay for it. Oh, I want a guide and I can pay for it, but my guide isn't even required to be. How do I find someone who's like been credentialed in the process? You know,
Right.
it's kind of interesting in that way, actually. And I think it's really unfortunate in terms of mental health, just
Yeah.
how we've made it so challenging
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
for someone to seek it. And yeah, I'm not shy about that opinion. I guess I am quite politically opinionated, but that's one area where I'm just like, no, that's just a moral failing.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I also want to point out though that you're really minimizing, I think, the importance of the outdoors. I mean,
Okay, fair.
so I mean, I think you're right. Maybe it's not necessary per se. I don't know. That's hard for me to get out of my own biases, but I think there is such an importance to the outdoors, right? And I hope you recognize that the work you're doing is not minimal. It's not taken for granted or just for fun. I mean, it is fun and that's needed, right? When if we think of mental health, right, we can kind of conceptualize it in a very generalized sense in kind of two ways, right? We can look at the positive and the negative, right? The negative being what we kind of traditionally think of as mental health, meaning, those areas of depression, anxiety, trauma, grief, all those areas that maybe we struggle with, that we are impacted by in a quote unquote negative way, right? And then we can kind of flip onto this other side of the positive, right? The areas in our life that are going well, right? The areas that do fuel us mentally and psychologically, right? The areas of our coping skills, of our passions, like we've been talking about, of those relationships that are really strong and healthy, right? And it's needed, right? Especially when we are dealing with some of these issues, as most of us have been in this, at least some form of depression, anxiety, I would argue, through
Sure,
COVID,
sure.
and so we need things like the outdoor space to be able to help balance that out, I think. Yeah. I
I
feel
I
like
appreciate
very
I
important.
appreciate that partner check. I do.
Yeah.
Um, I Yeah, I appreciate that partner check. I think that, and that reality check. I do. It is true. Yeah, there's definitely an importance to being able to say that you have access to not only those spaces, but also to the knowledge to be in those spaces in some form.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think this has been maybe a shortcoming of the mental health industry and of psychology that surprisingly has only been a recent development. There is this field now called positive psychology where it is focusing more on building up the strengths of the clients, right? It used to be all about, okay, here's what's going wrong, here's what's not working, we need to fix this, right? Kind of treating it in this kind of medical model that we still, unfortunately, in my opinion, unfortunately still do today. And only within the past, I want to say, 20 years maybe, have we started to look and say, oh, you know what, there are positive things about our clients too, right? Our clients do have strengths. There are things that maybe we could focus on more to build up rather than maybe just trying to minimize what's not working, right? If we can build up on their strengths and the things that are going good in their life. And I think the outdoor space, especially on the western part of the states, and it sounds like, again, this is where I'm a little bit more naive just because I grew up over in this side and haven't moved. But, especially over on the West, I'll say it's the whole outdoor identity is so big for a lot of people. And being able to go out and hike or being able to go out with their dogs for a run or paddle boarding or, I don't know, ATVing, is that a thing? Right? Four wheeling. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some people do, right? Whatever people are doing, maybe that space in the outdoors to feel alive, to feel adventurous, right? I think that's super important. I'm glad that we have advocates out there like you who are always pushing for that and being able to show others how to do that. So
Yeah, and I do, while we're on that subject too, I mean, that's like kind of part of the reason growing up in a poor family that never had access to being able to hire anyone for a recreational activity, especially. I want people to feel empowered to reach out to me, because I will do my best to answer you. And if I don't answer you, it's not because I don't care. It's just genuinely because I'm trying to make sure I get to everyone, and I will try to answer you in a like the best way I can. And I hope to, as soon as I can figure out the whole permitting situation and everything, and how legal this is in places, which again, it's just like, I don't understand how that comes into it, but it does. I want to be able to offer those clinics for people. In a way, what's cool about social media, we harp on social media as a bastion of
right.
toxic culture often. And yeah, 100%, I would say that that's a real problem. It is. And as millennials, like you and I grew up without the internet, and
Right.
then we very much had the internet.
Yep.
And watching this generation come up now, and by the way, I think every successive generation is better than the last. I'm definitely not one of the juvenoia types, but I do think the challenges that they face are the fact that their entire all social pragmatism is hashed out on the internet, and that's just, it comes with inherent problems. But I do also think that, well, if it's here, how can we use it for good? And I think what you're seeing now is this education movement on social media. Like, I mean, I get a ton of my education from YouTube
Right.
in a good way. Like, I try really hard to only listen to people who have, training or degrees, or who at the very least have just done incredible diligent amounts of like years worth of research into the subject that they talk about primarily.
Mm-hmm.
I am on Instagram and I follow other creators who do not just climbing things, but there are people who make I learned how to make the perfect steak in a cast iron the other day, although I am trying to be more vegetarian and vegan, but like, I was just like, that's too entertaining to not try.
Uh,
There is a movement happening. And so I want to see that access proliferated via social media, the most easy way that it can happen. And so that's like part of why this Instagram thing, is still important to me. I'm trying to make it better now actively.
mm-hmm.
I have better camera equipment now. Literally before we spoke, I've been like getting pictures off of this thing and
Yeah.
trying really hard to figure out, how do I make this better and cultivate it a little bit more. And so, yeah, I hope that people are able to, who can't afford me as an example out there in the real world consistently. First of all, I hope I can offer more affordable alternatives eventually in the future. And in the meantime, be a resource on
Mm-hmm.
the internet. And I know a lot of mental health counselors are doing that. Like, there's YouTube channels and Instagram accounts of doctors and like, MDs and LMHC, and like dentists and
Yeah.
all these people like who are on there now, and you can find them, and they're all there, and they're experts in their field,
Mm-hmm.
and they're people of all color, of all background, and it's pretty cool actually. So it's in the same way, it's been very liberating. And again, coming from what we were just talking about, which is the lack of access.
Yeah. No, I mean, a great insight. I think, part of the whole reason I even am doing this show is because of people like you. I think of you. I think of, there's this guy I follow named Matthias J. Barker who blew up on TikTok. He's a counselor as well, and was able to really utilize that space in such a unique way. If you guys haven't seen his videos, he has a podcast too that I listen to. And yeah, like I've spent this past year, I haven't personally posted on social media really, unless it's like sharing mental health resources on my stories. But I haven't posted on Instagram in like over a year, just because I've been thinking like, okay, I'm getting older. Like, how do I really want to be using this space where I'm not just like, posting about myself constantly anymore? Not that I really posted about myself constantly, but like, how do I want to be using the space? And like, and I have no qualms about anybody who is just posting about themselves and their life. And I think there's definitely some positivity in that too, and in a way of creative expression. But But for me, I was just really struggling. Like, I'm not really happy with like the time I'm spending on social media, just scrolling and liking other people's pics, and like, and so that's a big reason why I started this. Is like, okay, I do want to create more of a positive space, and if I can be sharing something that I've been spending so much time like researching and learning about and practicing, like, then why not?
100%.
So guys like you have definitely inspired me and others to be able to do that, and I think that's really cool, and I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I think it is pretty easy for a lot of us to harp on social media because of a lot of those negative interactions that we have in that space. And okay, if that's the case, then how do we really utilize the positives in that the best we can? So I think that's really cool. I'm also glad that we've been kind of incorporating this talk of privilege, which I don't know how much we can really get into this, speaking as two white men, but I think, especially in the outdoor industry and in the mental health industry, at least for a while, there is a certain amount of privilege. I think of, when I was a high school. Well, so I got into climbing when I was in middle school. I'm growing up in a very predominantly white suburb of Denver, right? North Denver, Broomfield. And I was able to join a rock climbing club in my middle school, high school. And I mean, it was pretty much all white. I mean, the school alone was pretty much all white. I think we had like a handful of, you know, kids who were black, kids who were Asian, yeah, maybe a slightly larger Hispanic population, but predominantly white. And so, and I'm sure that's maybe similar, and you could probably speak better to this, but the outdoor industry has been limited, I think, because of not only money, finances, but just also location and accessibility and some of those other things that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, it when we talk about, especially it's easy when we talk about recreation, but and we talk about mental health, especially just even our view of mental health. Me as a white man, my view of mental health is so different than that of a black man growing up. Literally could have grown up in if I grew up in a middle class existence, a black man next to me could have grown up in that same middle class existence and have a completely different outcome just based on skin color alone, much less the fact that media is designed around me. There's this great YouTube channel that I just found yesterday called FD Signifier. He's got like 39,000 subscribers at this point. I think his channel needs to grow more because he really put into perspective. He has a video about like, why do white men love edgelords so much, like Joker movies and Fight Club, and which I was like, instantly, I hadn't, because last year I think all of us who are in this position, last year, like I had my first reckoning in 2012 with the Trayvon Martin murder, and then the ultimate birth of Black Lives Matter, and I'm now having that moment again where I'm starting to realize like, oh yeah, like even like why do I enjoy characters like that so much? And that goes directly into mental health. I mean, take a character like Joker, for example, who is like this seemingly unhinged person that for some reason any like white kid who's been through even the slightest amount of trauma or whatever have been through now, and or for any reason relates to that character. Any of my friends who are black don't necessarily, I mean, like it's not to say that they don't, but like what FD Signifier was saying was that, like, he just couldn't relate to that character because like, it's just, how, oh man, I'm going to butcher. I really so badly don't want to butcher what he said, but essentially it's that like, so for me, even growing up poor, even though I grew up in that same neighborhood, at least until the age of 11, I didn't experience it the same way he did. And so for me, I got to see someone like Joker as like, oh yeah, like what happens when I lose control,
Right.
versus he's like, no, if I lose control, I get shot.
Mm, yeah.
And I'm completely butchering the way he said it, but it essentially kind of
Uh,
wraps around that. And I think with that's like, wow, for in terms of mental health, I mean, especially in like the outdoor space, it's
mhm,
like just how we experience it is completely different.
mhm.
And yeah, I can't even, and I don't know what to do with that information except like, okay, well now I know this. And, from where I stand, I'm like, well, all I can do from my stance at the moment until someone gives me feedback that I can do something better is like, first of all, just keep putting out as much free content as I possibly can.
Mhm.
And also making myself available emotionally as I possibly can to say that I can't necessarily relate and sympathize, but I can empathize. Or is it the other way around? I'm sorry. Um,
No, yeah.
yeah,
Or empathy being
empathize, but I can't necessarily sympathize. Like I haven't also gone through exactly what they've gone through myself, but nonetheless,
sympathize, not empathize, I think is what,
yes,
yeah. Mhm.
sympathize, not empathize. Thank you. But nonetheless, I will at least make it say that it's okay for everyone to be able to put all this out there.
Mhm.
And then you're simultaneously making it okay to, well, like it is okay to put it out there. Now it's like, how will that be received? And I don't know. And, from there moving forward, it's, yeah, obviously that's still a big component of it. And in terms of mental health, I mean, that's not my specialty, but I'm sure that you've got some insight into that, at least in terms of the discrepancy, because I could talk, for days about like how we've systematically made it extremely difficult for people of color, even much less the LGBTQ community, to be a part of this space. I'm glad that's changing, thankfully.
Right. But slow
But
change.
anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so many great insights in what you just said. But, I'm really glad that you kind of voice like this idea of like, okay, I know this now. And like, now what? Like, I don't know what to it's almost like I don't know what to do with what I know. Like, having this increased awareness over your own privilege, which I feel like it's when we say that, like, oh, I have privilege, like that sounds like such a it's I don't it shouldn't sound like a negative thing, but maybe it's been warped to for a lot of maybe white middle class upper class individuals to be a negative thing. And like having privilege and recognizing it is not in and of itself such a negative thing, right? It's what we do with that information. It's how we hold that information in our hearts, and how we ultimately, what we ultimately do with that. And so I'm glad that you were kind of able to recognize, okay, I know I'm learning this about myself. I'm learning that there are these areas in my life that are different, right, than maybe other people of color, or people who identify in the LGBTQ plus community, because that's been kind of my experience, growing up and growing into this field of mental health, and learning so much about myself, which I think is one of the really cool things about this program. And I'm sure your partner will also be experiencing here soon enough. But just learning so much about yourself and your own privilege, and that's kind of like, okay, well, I know this, and what do I do with it?
Yeah, I agree, and I think like having our spaces for doing this is one thing. I feel like it's for me what listening to FD Signifier really did was it made me realize that okay, so like I've had that information and I sat with it, but I didn't really sit with it enough. And so what that means now is that okay, well now I actually need what can I do to make effective change? Well, I've got the voting thing. I obviously like, I mean, it's like I am now voting for those politicians that will ultimately affect the most progressive change as much as possible. That's easy though, because that's just me literally getting to like, sure, I might write a senator every once in a while. I might vote. I will definitely vote in elections. But okay, what can I do now though? Like, what can I get up tomorrow and do? And for me right now, it's like, and the thing that I struggle with is because I don't, well, I'll just say the thing I struggle with is that I want to offer, like, I want to go to climbers of color and say, hey, we all come over here to Mazama and I'll just give you a free course. And then the really shitty thing is that as soon as I think that, the next thing on my mind is, oh shit, are they gonna like, I don't want to be white savior. Like I definitely don't want to do that. Yeah. And by the way, that's totally valid, because like I won't, I'm not
Mhm.
like, I've had years to sit with this now, and I genuinely think I am just doing it because I want to give space for people in like completely independent of finances or whatever,
Right.
or cultural. But the thing is, the thing I can't separate is the fact that, well, but how is it like, a straight white male instructor is now lending over this instruction with that power dynamic in place. And then on top of that, it's also what, okay, well, is this even legal? Can I like have a bunch of people over? First of all, I think it totally is. And then but it doesn't matter, because the deal is that I should just do it. Like how, I'm
It's really complex. I mean, I think you're pointing out some really, you know, looking at it from all these different directions. I think earlier I simplified it a little bit too much, of saying like, oh, well, now that we have this awareness, as if it's this final complete thing. And the reality is it's definitely not, right? It's obviously an ongoing process for the rest of our lives of increasing our awareness, of recognizing our privilege, of learning how do we continue to engage with the Black community, or the LGBTQ community, the POC community, whatever it might be. And it is an ongoing process, which I think is really important to recognize.
Yeah, and I I think that those next steps are going to be, first of all, I'm glad change is happening. I think that it is now just, it's beyond the reckoning. It is, what do we do with it? And for me, like, those next steps are laid out fairly clearly. It's like, I'm just going to offer as many programs as I can, financially feasibly for me, which at this moment I regret to say is a little challenging, given that I just canceled all of my August work
Sure.
and September work. But yeah, yeah, like, yeah, it is. I mean, those, I have steps now. It's just following through with them, right? And in terms of where that leads us into, just the ability for people to feel welcome in this space. Yeah, I really have just, I did just kind of step back and was just like, yeah, what do I need to learn in order to make this happen? So Bo Burnham says it well in that special, where he's like, we've had the floor for at least 600 years. Maybe we should just shut the fuck up. And then he interrupts himself by saying, like, I'm bored. I don't want to do that. it's like, oh man, that really sums it up kind of well.
Honestly, I really enjoyed his special as well, and I thought, like, wow, this is not typical Bo Burnham. First off, and yeah, like, I think he touched on a lot of touchy subjects that were important to talk about. And but I just want to keep encouraging you. I mean, I think the fact that you're even having these reflections, that you're having these discussions with others, it says a lot. And the reality is there's so many people, maybe in positions like ourselves, who do come with some white privilege, or privilege in general, that aren't having these reflections, that aren't having these discussions, and are blissfully unaware and ignorant of it. And so, whether you're doing quote unquote enough or not enough, I mean, I think the fact that you are taking the steps and you have the desire to be more aware is a great, at least at the very least, first step, and says a lot. So,
Well, and to take this in a little bit more passionate direction, and kind of like bringing it back into just in general,
mm-hmm.
in this country, what we have done systematically is that we have said, you gotta have, like, my adoptive dad always said growing up, money talks, shit walks. And man, how frustrating is it that he was so right about that? Because we have just made it such that, oh, if you don't have money, you are inherently seen as well, you just didn't try hard enough. And then it's like, okay, well, what about all these systematic ways in which someone wasn't able to get money. I mean, just take redlining in Black populations as just a very, very small example. I mean, like the inability to create family wealth. Take white Southern rural Appalachian families in West Virginia, Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, whose homes were literally just demolished by the Tennessee Valley Authority,
Wow.
or who coal mines have completely polluted all the streams around them, have left them with literally nothing. There was literally a song called "I Sold My Soul to the Company Store," because the company store was the only place they could buy food with the money that the company gave them. They didn't pay them in American dollars. They paid them in the company's own currency that you could only use there. And then you take education away from it. We've said that, for a long time, I mean, private schools genuinely came out of segregation, or actually, well, they came out of integration, because essentially white families said, we're going to take our students out of this, our kids out of this, because whatever. And then and we had private schools. All of a sudden, you have the health industry, which already communities are skeptical of, because you had the Tuskegee experiments, and now we have an entire population of hell. I mean, now we have entire populations of people who don't even believe in and healthcare at all, because vaccines is an example right now, because we've stripped away all of the social structures that would help us all come under that umbrella and take care of all of us in that equal way. We have such a long systemic history of it, that something like healthcare, for example, like I can't afford healthcare. I mean, because like healthcare, that's like low on the totem pole, right? I've got to like take care. I mean, I have one kidney. I had a kidney removed when I was 9 years old.
Oh.
My mother passed away because she lost both of hers. They caught mine in time,
Mhm.
and I still to this day don't know how much my adoptive family paid for that. I will probably never know, because they never talk to me about finances.
Mhm.
And like mental health, like, well, I've got this kidney I got to take care of. I can't afford that. I got to go to like dialysis. Like, I don't do that actually, but a lot of people are in that position. Like, I can't afford a mental health counselor. I'm paying all my money towards dialysis. And
Mhm.
yeah, and as soon as you put any other component on top of that, apart from just being poor, as soon as you add any other degree, you make it really difficult.
Mhm.
I mean, hell, you make it impossible a lot of the time. And the reason I'm getting so kind of inflamed about this right now is just because it's something that has in recent years has been. I mean, I've always been someone questioning why things are the way they are. I am now in that position of like, I'm just still kind of angry. I kept all that anger as from being a teenager and not ever having answers and always being told things that didn't make sense. And now I'm like, well, now I know why they don't make sense, and I'm demanding that you change it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to express that anger. It's probably part of like my mental health condition right now, is the fact that I have all of this anger towards the system that we've created in this country, and it's all connected,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, and again, just kind of linking it back there, there is a term for that. I don't know if it fully falls, or if we can fully kind of conceptualize it in this way, but there is this idea of righteous anger, is what they
Mm.
call it. And typically they use that in regards to racial justice, but I think it can be applicable here in terms of, yeah, like our system is broken. Like there is not, and there's never going to be a perfect system. At least I think so.
Sure.
And I think being able to recognize that and having this anger of like, this is not just, it's not right that black people are still getting shot down in the streets left and right. It's not right that mental health care has become so inaccessible, right? To the point where I think something like 12 million, this is in regards to domestic violence, something like 12 million people a year are affected by domestic violence. But like the reality is there's so much that's not just, and having this anger that is righteous, that is grounded in kind of a healthy sense of anger, I think is important, and it's important to recognize. And I think it can be an important driver in terms of the change that we do make in our individual lives and communities.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when it comes to our collective, like no one is an island. And I think this ties into mental health. It ties into it literally is every facet of our society. The broken part of our system is that we have allowed ourselves to be fooled into thinking that we are all individuals, and our decisions alone create the factors that control our lives. When you really sit someone down and you talk about everything, you will always back them into who believes that, you will always back them into a corner where they can't escape, which is like, yeah, the past influences the present, period. I mean, we literally teach history, and there's literally a saying that says, like, history, that is, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. I mean, so this idea that somehow the past doesn't influence the present, I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. We have historical baggage, and that's the way it is. And that's financial, it's racial, it's ethnic, it is sexual, it is
So
religious, it is everything. Everything comes with baggage, and everything has a consequence. Every action in the past has a consequence to the present, and thinking about that is really overwhelming. And I think it's scary, and I think it's really hard to put aside your place in the world to think about those things. But the thing is that it directly affects you. Those things affect all of us. If the most right-leaning Trumpian conservative who is extremely poor living in a trailer park in rural Alabama begins to understand that it's not the same, if they begin to understand that they live in the same society that's holding down their Black brothers and sisters, like as soon as they realize they too are being pushed under the boot of that same system, well, then that's when we're going to get real change. And I think that's the difficult part for me right now, is that I'm very angry. I have a private Facebook page that I definitely put some opinions on, and I've only recently done that. And I guess I've literally only done that twice, and I'm like, wow, okay, that's where all the division comes from. And now I'm starting to see how like my anger affects like certain people. So now I'm trying to figure out, how do I be angry with some compassion? And that's like my next challenge right now. Like, how do I Kurt Hahn and Outward Bound would always ask, like, above all, compassion. And so how are you, wrapping all of your feedback with assertiveness, but also compassion?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to have that space, I think, again, to have that anger that you're speaking to is super important.
Yeah, we don't have news anchors anymore, right? We have pundits, and I have the pundits that I like. I as someone who identifies as a progressive, I definitely have the people that I listen to some, but I also, as long as I'm holding to some kind of true north of values that I uphold, I will call them out, at least personally, or I will reach out personally to them via social media and say, like, within reason, like, I think your argument for this is flawed. It's because, again, they're a pundit with an opinion and a following, right? And political beliefs can ebb and flow and sway, and just like anything. And we have to be prepared to challenge even the people that we trust the most, which is, I mean, I understand that gets you into trouble sometimes, because then, like, now you have people challenging doctors saying that you need a vaccine.
Right.
If this doctor, she tells me I need a vaccine, well, I'm going to do it because, she's an MD. Like, they're an MD, and I'm going to take this vaccine. Like, but now you have people saying, like, well, you can't trust them. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't have that belief before, and it's okay to grow and everything, but you're regressing. That's not progressing, because this is you compartmentalize this over here because it's progress. Whereas, yeah, maybe at one point you were more liberal and now you became more conservative because of X. Okay, well, that's fine. But now you're literally dealing with a thing that can kill you.
Right.
And anyway, it's
I get it. I mean, I'm probably, I don't know if I'm exposing myself too much on here, sharing my own opinions, but I saw this thing the other day on Facebook, and it was something along the lines of, you know, people are so adamant to fight against these organizations that get billions of dollars a year in terms of funding for research, and these obviously highly qualified individuals in terms of degrees in their education and experience, and and this idea that these people who are just doing their own research through Google seems to somehow know better. And I don't know, like I'm not gonna fully speak into what I believe, but the reality is I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical doctor, right? And so I leave, kind of like you've been saying, like I leave the expertise to the experts, right? I trust that the experts know what they're talking about because they're experts in their field, and that's not where my field of expertise lies.
Yeah, I mean, one place where I've been trying to use a phrase I've been trying to use less is that, oh, I've done research on it. No, I haven't. I haven't like stayed up day and night and did an entire thesis on,
Right.
the cost benefit analysis of using a girth hitch on a stopper. Like I haven't. I say that because that's literally a video I just finished today. Um,
Yeah.
it's just I I haven't done that. And what I've done is that I have compiled other people's research to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
Calling it research, really, that's all I've done. I've read research, or I mean, yeah. So I'm trying to get rid of that. I'm policing my language in that way. I'm also trying to figure out how I can also put out there and well continue to. This is something I'm pretty passionate about. Is I'm very passionate. Just because I took my Alpine Guide course does not mean that I'm going to throw up on my Instagram account that says I'm an apprentice Alpine Guide. That is not in any way to say that someone who has taken it shouldn't put up that they've taken that course. That is 100% okay. It's completely within the bounds of the code of conduct, and that's fine. I think what I'm trying to establish is a baseline of and I actually noticed you do this in your email too. Like you actually put in that you have not yet been certified in it.
Yeah.
But you are nonetheless in the program. And that is incredibly pro. I mean, I wish that we just had transparency like that all of the time. I mean, doctors do it, right? There are definitely doctors who have misrepresented themselves. And so, I mean, and this, again, I'm not knocking on chiropractors or anything, but there was a chiropractor who made the whole, the 5G thing conspiracy, helped to elevate the 5G conspiracy theory. And around COVID last year, I know it's crazy that there's been so many conspiracy theories. It's when was that?
Right.
And it's they were misrepresenting their credentials, and every time they would sit down and blog about it, or vlog about it, they would call themselves a doctor. And it's look, again, that's not to, I'm not poo-pooing a chiropractor. I'm just saying that that is grossly misrepresenting your specialty, your expertise. And that's something us, you and I as professionals, I think can always just continue to try to uphold. It's you want to reach out to me and talk about how this anchor distribution works in this regard based on upward and downward pull because it's in this specific context. Great, man. Come to me. I'm so happy to talk about that. But then if you're going to come to me and say, hey, what do you think about the holding capabilities of a backfilled T-trench anchor on a glacier versus a not backfilled anchor? And I'm well, I can give you an opinion, but I haven't been certified in that yet.
Right.
And that's about as far as I can go. Here's a great place you can go to find better research.
Well, the best way that I can think of to compare that is in my field, we probably similar to the outdoor industry, kind of like what you've been talking about, is we can only stay within the confines of what we are certified, what we are licensed to practice, right? Which is mental health, right? Meaning, for example, we aren't allowed to touch on pretty much anything medical related. So in terms of recommendations, and maybe I'm not fully aware of this as I'm still learning, but from what I understand, I can't ethically say, hey, it sounds like you're having some sleep disturbances. You're having some difficulty falling asleep at night. You should take some melatonin, right?
Right.
Because that is not my field of practice, right? That's a medical thing because it's medication, right? And so I can't
Right.
say, oh, try taking 10 milligrams tonight for of the melatonin. And that's not where I can't speak into that. I have my opinions about that. I take melatonin and it works for me. So you should try it too. But I can't ethically say, oh, as your mental health provider, I think you should take this. I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to, give you as homework is what they'll say a lot in counseling, that you should do this. So I think you're right. I think there does need to be that transparency, and unfortunately, at least in the counseling world, that is very clear in our ethics, is like you can't be misrepresenting yourself, and it probably still happens, as it does in other fields. But I think the ACA, the American Counseling Association, has done a pretty good job of making that clear, and I think they do a pretty good job at least. But I don't know, maybe I'm not reading the right news sites.
Well, this goes back into I do think, I mean, because you could cut out like so much filler here, but this I do think is important for what we're talking about and where our professions align, is that, again, in our country, this very individualistic mindset, we don't regulate these industries very well.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm calling out my own industry in that regard. I actually think that like your industry and mine have actually done a wonderful self-policing job to the best of our abilities. And I'm ignorant of
No,
the implications of yours. Yeah. Um, yeah. So yours is lightly regulated as well.
yeah, so I mean, they're finally. It seems like they're finally starting to crack down on it and make it a more nationally coherent system. But I mean, as of right now, that I'm aware of, and for the past, as it has been in the past, um, it differs from state to state. Like I know to get licensed, for example, in Colorado, it is a minimum of 2 years post graduation work with 2,000 hours that you need, versus like in Texas, for example, it's 3,000 hours. So like each state differs in terms of how many hours you need, even what they call us. I mean, unfortunately, and this is kind of a tangent, but like counseling is such a broad word, right? We could use counseling for so many to describe so many different things, and same with therapy, right? When we're talking about therapy, we could be talking about recreational therapy, we could be talking about equine therapy, we could be talking about physical therapy, right? All these different things that when we think of mental health therapy, right, it's obviously different. And so they've just done a poor job initially of really making this a nationally recognized thing of like, okay, when we say therapy, when we say counseling, it's like its own thing. And again, it differs state by state. If I were to be licensed in Colorado, but then try to move to a different state, again, it just depends, right? You may have to take a couple classes depending on the state to kind of have that license be the same and transfer over. You might have to do a little bit more work experience. I don't know. It really depends on a lot of factors. And again, this is from what I'm aware of, but it's obviously not very, you know, universal in the US.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm sure it's more multifaceted and complicated too than guiding as an example. But I
Right.
just think that's a very healthy. I think that's good for any consumer listening to understand that I really don't like this. The Consumer Protection Bureau should be much stronger. There should be a more heavy-handed consequences for misrepresenting your credentials for your given profession. I don't think every profession needs to have a credential per se. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that um, things that directly affect the health, and I mean health broadly, or literal life and limb of an individual should be regulated. I think it should be regulated heavily. We do it across the board. We do it for haircuts. I mean, if we can regulate the haircut industry, I think we can be okay regulating the mental health industry or the guide industry. I don't.
A more serious way.
Yeah, in a much more serious way. And Also, I struggle with even calling it the health industry because it's a need. We can say that recreation people need that too, and I'm fine making that argument. But one thing that's undeniable is that people need health, need their health, and calling it an industry, I think, is perverting to some degree the profession, and that's obviously my non-medical opinion. And I think it should be much more called something along. Well, it's all semantics, but I don't think industry.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's that?
I was just saying, yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, language it's what it comes down to is the language we're using and how it's being interpreted and how we're using it to define different things. And this is all very systemic, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we can't just change how we call things on an individual level and expect it to change on the societal level. But I think you're right. I mean, I think that's really something I haven't really thought of, this idea of, we're calling it an industry. And what does industry mean? Industry means business, right? I mean, industry means money, right? Which is going back to what we're talking about. Money is the root of all evil, if you will, right? Money is really has a huge grip on a lot of these different areas that is preventing a lot of access. So
yeah, and I just think that representing ourselves in the meantime is going to be important, and I just appreciate what you're doing with that in that regard, and the fact that you're making this podcast is, I think, emblematic of what we can do to start reaching the arm out to people and say, to the best of our ability, this is okay that you're feeling this way,
right.
and 100% reach out to me. And I can do whatever I can. I mean, I have to put food on my table. In my case, I had to put food on my lap. I don't have a table these days.
You have a Frisbee, maybe?
Yeah, right. I know. But I never did the Frisbee ball. But no, I should. It's dual purpose. But I do think that being able to look to people and say that you have this not only is acceptable, we are advocating that it should be commonplace, and that you should have access to it regardless of your circumstance. And eventually that's where I'd like to put the guiding industry, and that's what I can focus on right now. But I also recognize that even though I think it is important, I don't think it's the most important thing right now. But it is what I can work on.
Yeah. And that is your experiences, and that's what you do, right? You are a guide, and that doesn't necessarily need to limit who you are, and I'm not trying to limit your identity, I guess, in that sense, but like that is where you've been called to work and to use that space to advocate for others and to lead others and teach others, and that's a space you can really excel in doing good work in, I think. Does that make sense in what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's the thing that I have direct control over, and in this world you only have direct control over certain things, and you can work within that realm, and it's very difficult to escape, and do other things.
And also, like, you're obviously so knowledgeable about so many different things, and how many other people can say that, comparatively not a lot, right? And so you are in this unique position where you get to share that with others, and there is a population out there who's wanting that, right? There are people who really look for that kind of direction, for that kind of instruction, for this area of life to really lean into that positive side of their mental health, right? And I think that's a really cool space that you get to live in and not limit yourself, right? I think I'm really excited to kind of hear what you end up coming up with in terms of expanding your sphere of influence, if you will. I'm sure you're cooking up some good ideas right now. So
what I really want to do is, because I am opinionated on a lot of topics, is that I do want to create a page that is just me ranting about, and I'm going to try to distill it, and keep it 1 minute or less, just about an opinion on a political subject, perhaps. But no, I'm joking partly, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I mean, is there anything else? I feel like this might be a good wrapping up point. Is there anything else you feel like you want to kind of throw out there, or any passing words of wisdom?
The guide process, going through this AMGA process and becoming a guide, has taught me a lot about self-control. It has taught me a lot about how to deal with my anxiety and my self-deprecation, my imposter syndrome that I often feel. It has taught me to deal with that in a way. It's given me again, I come back to this a lot, but it's given me a true north to always handle.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hope that whoever it does listen to this, that they can find something that they can really put their heart behind and pursue it. If they're not able to do it as a primary means of a lifestyle and career, I at least hope they get to do it passively, even if that's literally just watching YouTube videos to get started. I mean, whatever it is, I just hope people can put themselves through an apprenticeship like that, that will force them into all of those things. It will bring out all of their weaknesses and challenges, and it will force them to contend with them and to contend with how they operate in their world. Whatever that is for you, that person, I just hope that you are able to explore that. And I will fight as much as I can to make sure that you have the right to do that, because I think that people should be able to, in the richest country on the planet, should be able to pursue the thing that they either are naturally good at or want to be good at.
Man, that's great, Cody.
Thanks for giving me the space to say that, Josh.
Appreciate your time. I hope I didn't take up too much of it.
None.
I feel like I didn't even, there's so much more we could still talk about. I feel like there's so many questions I still have. We'll have to do another part, part 2 sometime.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey man, it's good to see you. It's good to, actually speak with you and be with you in this space. And sucks that it's virtual, but I'm glad that you're taking the space to rest and take care of yourself. So
thanks, Josh. Thanks for giving me a space to say a lot of that. Thanks for giving me a platform to say a lot of that. I look forward to my followers being able to listen to you. And I look forward to us maybe actually getting out to go out and climb. Maybe we'll go out and share some pitches, like actually.
Yes, definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, and good luck to you and everything you're doing right now, and more power to you. We need more people like you. So thanks for doing what you do.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely reach out. Let me know. And I'd love to do this again.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure we will. So
awesome, Josh. Great talking to you.
Yeah, you as well, man.